Hi Rachel, how's things?
Hi, Matthew. Things are going well, thank you. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Thanks for coming on and having this chat with me. Obviously, we've been acquainted now on LinkedIn for a little while, and we've been kind of supporting each other with respect to the campaign that I've been running around male mental health and suicide prevention. So, first of all, please do tell us kind of how you managed to get invested in this area and kind of what you're working on at the moment.
Sure. Well, I'm very excited to talk with you, so thank you for this opportunity.
Pleasure.
Um, yeah, so mental health is really critical, but it's something that we're only recently starting to talk openly about. It's such a stigmatized topic, and even though we're tending to talk about it more in a broad sense, we still don't openly talk about men's mental health. Um, it's even more stigmatized, and there are so many factors as to why men tend to keep that in even more than women do. And mental health is something that, um, you know, we need to change the narrative around it and this perception that it's something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. And it's something that we work on by ourselves, in the shadows. We need to open that up because we can't get through it by ourselves. I think that a lot of the reason why um, mental health gets so drastic, and actions get taken to the extreme, people with substance abuse and suicide and so many different measures, is because we feel like we have to deal with it by ourselves. And that's not a healthy approach. And, we have that saying for children, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to survive as an adult, I think. And so it's important to have resources and be able to talk openly about mental health. But from my perspective, I'm really interested in supporting men um, in overcoming sort of the traditional gender role sort of conditioning that you have to like man up. Don't cry, don't be such a girl, shake it off, put some dirt on it. It's don't ask for help because asking for help is weakness. And so that's where my interest really comes um, in supporting this demographic that is highly underserved and has far fewer resources. So going a little bit even further into that, I specialize mainly in working with married men with children, because that is a population that we often don't think of as lonely and suffering from this loneliness epidemic because they have a family. We think of men who suffer from depression and loneliness as being people who are alone, and that's not necessarily the case. And there are many factors why loneliness affects married men with children at such a large rate, which is a whole other thing. And so I go even further to speak to those men and allow them to feel safe and seen and get the support that they need so that they can show up more fully in their families.
Mm. Absolutely. So let's just kind of dig into that a little bit more, because I was really interested that you kind of touched on at the end there about kind of married men and loneliness. Like what's going on there? Like, because it does seem like immediately like it would seem like a paradox that married men can feel lonely. So kind of what's going on there? Do you think?
Well, I guess I'll start more at the immediate and kind of work back as to what I believe is going on there. So what I know from my experience being out in the world and just life experience and seeing relationships around me, but also in my experience working with clients, is that men in relationships, when they don't start out from an authentic place,
Mm-hmm.
and in a relationship that grows and the couple grows together and is continuously evolving together, there's bound to be a disconnect that happens. We stop expressing, what it is that we really want, what we really need from our partner. And so little by little, these cracks in the walls become big gaping holes that become harder to fill. So there's already a growing disconnect. And so many factors in long-term relationships can also attribute to these growing cracks, right? But something that I have seen pretty consistently is that it grows exponentially once kids come into the picture, because kids rightfully become the priority. And when kids become the sole priority of the mother, the relationship gets neglected, and the husband therefore feels like, I guess I'm just, bringing home the income or providing in whatever sense I provide. I don't know what my role here is anymore because I'm dad, and it doesn't matter how involved with the kids they are. That initial primary relationship breaks down because the focus becomes solely about the kids, and then dad gets left behind. So if the relationship has already sort of started to deteriorate and the disconnect has grown, because again, if we start off relationships not being our authentic selves, meaning we date, always putting our best foot forward, and we always want to be pleasing and seem like we're go with the flow and low maintenance, and we say yes to doing activities and things that we don't actually want to do. Compromise is a totally separate thing, but there's a point when we compromise who we are and what is important to us that sets a precedent where we are always trying to please the other and not advocating for ourselves in the relationship. So if the relationship continues down that path and other factors come in to compound these areas of disconnect, and then this area with kids coming in, becoming the sole priority, husband shuts down, and feels invisible. Maybe feels like a failure. A lot of men that I've spoken to since the pandemic this year feel like they're failing as a husband and a father. And that's a very lonely place to be. So we have all of these regular stressors contributing to mental health and mental unwellness, which I choose to say because mental illness is so stigmatized that we instantly go to diagnoses of one form or another. But there are all these factors that men are already sort of dealing with when it comes to work stress and performance, and then coming home and feeling like they're not doing enough, or having their emotional needs met at home, or all of these things. Then we add the pandemic onto that, and many men are feeling like they're failing their families. And if they don't feel that their partner is a safe space to share all of these emotions and thoughts and fears and doubts and concerns or triumphs with, because of the history of the relationship that's broken down, and they've gotten to that place where they keep everything in, then they're not going to be sharing any of this new stress of uncertainty and all of that with their partner either. So it compounds the problem, and it compounds the loneliness. I'll leave it there for a minute before I...
No, that's like a big kind of food for thought there, because I was kind of visualizing as you were talking. I was kind of thinking, like, if children are in the picture and they have problems, and obviously children need to be catered for anyway, like that might get stepped up, if you like, to the mum. And then if the mum is under pressure, the mum might step up that to the guy, and kind of the guy then is kind of catering for obviously their wife or partner, and then the children. And it's kind of like, who is the guy stepping up their problems to? Like, who are they kind of going to? It kind of comes back to that issue that you raised at the start about kind of men, contrary to kind of how we sometimes think, men do actually suffer. Men do have, the same kind of turbulent emotions as women, so they kind of need that person to to turn to. And I guess like if they're catering for other people and it's kind of there's nobody around to cater for them, then it's presumably going to come out in a really negative way.
Correct. Yeah. And also going back to that relationship piece, you know, with the kids kind of going up to the mom, and then the mom kind of goes to the dad. There's also this other area with the disconnect in marriages, where we hear this a lot, and I tend to hear women think that, well, this is a whole other topic about, but essentially what I wanted to say in this space was, you know, oftentimes women with children, you know, women nowadays are not just moms. They're, you know, they're career oriented. They have so many other things on their plates, and it's overwhelming, and women deal with a lot of the stress as well. There tends to be an attitude, if the husband then comes in and expresses, you know, does, let's say on the rare example, express, hey, you know, I need to talk, like I'm really going through something, and I would hope that a wife, if the husband was coming from that, you know, angle, would be more receptive. But a lot of times I hear women say, like, I don't need another kid. You know, I need you to be my husband. I'm not your mother, you know? And so this is another sort of dynamic that gets pulled into the marriage that shuts men down. But then going back, so I wanted to include that, but going back to what you were just saying, yeah, men tend to not have someone who is showing up for them at that point. It gets capped with them because men are historically not encouraged to talk about what they're feeling or what they're going through. And they're even less encouraged to seek help, you know, of a professional sort of environment. And so it, you know, with this conditioning that men have grown up with, their partner, the person that they the person that they marry tends to be the one person that they feel that they have gotten to a level of safety and trust with, to be able to expand and share and talk about all of these things that are going on inside them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's their person, you know, that's their chosen person. And then once the relationship moves forward and the relationship itself gets neglected, then they've lost that one person. So they don't often have somewhere to go. And what often happens when we see affairs and infidelity is because a man who is in that state of having shut down on his partnership ends up talking to, you know, not saying this is somebody who's going and looking for it, but what tends to happen is they meet somebody who they naturally sort of get along with, they start talking, and they feel seen for the first time in a long time. And this person is filling a void that has been missing. And so there's a level of transference that happens there because, you know, and something that we hear a lot in, you know, movies and media when there's infidelity, and, you know, the common sort of response from the man is, but I don't love her, it didn't mean anything. And I think that that is very true in a lot of cases, because a lot of these men who have affairs don't have any intention of leaving their wife and their children, but they have that need to feel seen, and this person has filled that need to feel seen, and they feel like a man again. They feel valued, they feel appreciated, they feel accepted. That's what they're attracted to. A lot of times it's not actually the person, so there's really no intention of leaving for that person. So that's sort of the dynamic that's happening. And so what I do is sort of fill that void in a container that is safe and with professional boundaries, where a man can start to feel seen again and have that empowered feeling to then be able to, you know, for some men, it's a matter of just needing that space to be able to talk and have somebody acknowledge them and accept them for who they are and not shame them or criticize them or question their motives. and that's enough that it's like, I can get through XYZ, and that's enough to fill them up to show up back at home. And then, some men want to take it a step further and actually learn tools to be able to say, oh, this feels really good. I would like to have this, sort of space holding experience with my partner. How can I get that there? How can we transfer this feeling, of relief and connection and acceptance to my wife? And then, then I offer coaching that is for that, so that they can start to implement the techniques that I use so that they can reignite the intimacy in their relationship.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's really interesting. So how does that then play out on a practical level then? So like if kind of there's this dynamic in a relationship or in a marriage, and there's that kind of connection breaking down, like where would you start the process? Like what's the first thing that tangibly could be installed that would make things kind of better from a emotional standpoint for the guy?
The first part of it is really the sessions to hold the space, because even for men who think, yeah, I still think that there's a chance that I can reconnect with my wife. I think it's there, it's possible, but I don't know how to get there, so because it's two very different types of men. There's the men who just can't see that far ahead because they're in such a low state that the thought of even implementing anything in their relationship is way too far out there right now. But even for the men who think that that's possible, there still needs to be a period of building that confidence and that esteem back up, because in a lot of these cases, men have been so beaten down and have felt neglected for so long. It's like, retraining yourself to feel good and to feel confident and like it's possible. If you're training for a marathon, you don't just run a marathon. So for the techniques to actually stick and work, there has to be like sort of a foundation established before implementing. Does
Okay.
that answer?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like it sounds to me that you can't just with certain men try and install the kind of the change of dynamic in the relationship straight away. Like the man themselves needs to kind of be able to work on themselves and to kind of get that feeling of, is it like a feeling of like I'm justified in wishing for this? Like is there sometimes like that sense of guilt almost, like should I actually be feeling like I'm missing something? Like is that in and of itself unmanly? Like am I letting my wife and children down by having these insecurities and complaints? Because I can imagine that that would be something that the guys would have to try and overcome first. Like they're actually harboring a legitimate need for something.
Yes. Yeah. Because men are so biologically, if we go back and back and back, men are wired to be the protectors and the providers and to take care of their family unit. And that is still an innate quality, when we look at how, it's reinforced by just conditioning from our parents, from culture, from media, that men have to be the tough ones, they have to be the strong ones. And so there's a lot of resistance, particularly in men who are not familiar with or receptive to the idea of getting support, because there's such a strong resistance in feeling like, as long as I'm taking care of my family, I'm good. As long as I'm filling that role, that is what I am supposed to be filling as a man, and that's my duty as a man, then that's all that matters. So it can be really hard to sort of like break that resistance down, to be able to realize, but what about you? Why isn't your mental health important? It's very commendable, to have that need take care of everyone else, but who is taking care of you? And it's okay to want for yourself. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting. And like, part of me thinks that, like obviously recently I've been doing this campaign around International Men's Day, and in doing the research for that, like I came across, comments. Like I kind of did a lot of research online in terms of like what women were saying about kind of International Men's Day, and like some of the comments that I came across were like, well, why does it need to be one? Like every day is International Men's Day and things like that. And then I contrast that with like what you're saying, and I'm like, well, it doesn't sound like it. Like, you listen to some of the commentary and you kind of think that men must have this like utopian structure, and that they're all kind of, out there to power grab and to kind of do harm. And it's kind of, it leaves this feeling of, as a man, am I allowed to have problems? Like, because it sounds like we're all beastly. It sounds like we're all in need of being protected from, rather than in need of protection.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's very interesting the way that there is really that perception that the every day is Men's Day, and I hear that, and I can understand where that's coming from. But I mean, to that vein, if you look up gender studies on, to learn more, because I did this, I went sort of down a rabbit hole, because I'm so interested in the sociological aspects of, how men and women are conditioned, and biological wiring, and how we reinforce these ideas and everything. And gender studies, when you look into like a degree program or something of that nature, it's always women's studies. Gender studies is equated with women's studies. And now with LGBTQ and gender nonconforming studies, because that rose out of history needing to become herstory. So it's that same sort of, idea that like everything's been written by men historically. We're always hearing from the man's perspective. We need to bring in the women's voice and the women's perspective, but we don't. There's surprisingly not much. I mean, there are books and things, but there aren't degrees or programs that dive into masculinity and men's mental health. It's highly disregarded because of that sort of mindset that, we've been living in this patriarchal world. And so we need to shine a light on these other underheard voices, but we don't talk about what we've never really talked about is men's mental health. And so we're doing a disservice there by not having these conversations and not providing support and not understanding how the conditioning has really played into the patriarchy that we have now, and the beastliness of events that happen, and the Me Too movement and all of these things that compound the idea of toxic masculinity, and to be a man asking for support is ridiculous, or that it's all of these sorts of notions. It's really problematic, and it's really doing a disservice because we're completely excluding a whole group of people who are suffering a lot of times in silence.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing that I always think, like, it's not a case of men don't suffer, it's that men suffer in silence, and that's kind of a really toxic mix. Just kind of thinking about the couples dynamic again, like I'm thinking kind of try and boil that down in a practical sense for us. So like a man on a typical day at home, like what is it that they kind of need that's a sense of fulfillment that they don't necessarily get? Is it that conversation? It's that kind of physical comfort? Like what is it precisely in a practical sense that would help somebody tangibly on a daily basis as a man to feel more secure?
It's all of the above. It's very sensory, and so there's the conversational aspect in that sense of, being able to talk through things, not even the deeper sort of emotional components as far as like, I had a really hard day, this is what's going on, but also just in terms of being able to be heard, telling the same work story for the third time, what it boils down to is that everybody wants to feel seen. And a lot of times, in relationships, it gets to a point where the man in the relationship doesn't feel seen. And so that can be as simple as, wanting to talk about the day, something that happened with a coworker, or, something funny, something, whatever. And they're not feeling heard because, the kids are screaming about, the iPad, and mom's like, wait, what? I got to do the kids. I've got my own thing. I'm cooking dinner. It's just not listening to one another. So it can be as simple as something like that, where it's like, I'm just trying to tell you about my day and open, women say we want men to be more open and share things with us, but we do not demonstrate that in our behaviors towards men. It's highly hypocritical, the things that we say that we want and the things that we actually show that we want. And that sends mixed messaging for men, because it's like, you want me to talk, but then I'm trying to tell you about what happened during my day and you don't have time for me. So something just as simple as that. And then going, next level, actually talking about the deeper emotional stuff, which for some men at a certain point, like, they can't even get that far because they're not being heard with the random day-to-day conversations. And then there's also the touch component, and not even talking about sex, but talking about platonic, healthy touch that is affectionate. Because there's also something that can happen over time when the disconnect in the relationship breaks, it builds, the disconnect builds. And perhaps, just as an example, a man comes home and says, like, maybe he does say, I had a really hard day, or just, oh, can I have a hug? And depending on whatever the history of that relationship is, he might be met with like, what do you want? What did you do wrong? I'm not in the mood for sex. Don't start anything. I have a headache, right? So that basic need for touch, because touch is such a basic human need to be held, and it releases oxytocin, which is a feel-good chemical in the system, and it encourages bonding. If men are not even getting a hug, then they're, and they're being met with these kinds of responses, then they're going to stop asking. And so that furthers. So, I mean, it's mental, it's physical, it's emotional. There are just so many factors that can lead to further shut down.
That is really interesting. So kind of tell us a little bit about kind of how the work is working out then with the connection coaching. Like, are you kind of seeing some positive movements? Like, are you seeing that men are able to kind of move in the direction of being able to kind of get these things in their life and their marriage?
What I'm seeing is more men are interested in the first sort of part of the work, because like I said, I have it separated. So one is a coaching track and the other is non-coaching, because some men, like, the idea of coaching and doing any work, especially with everything going on, it's very daunting and unappealing right now. So there's more interest in the first part, which is sort of space holding sessions. And men feel surprised at how quickly they feel better just from having somebody sort of pay complete attention to them and be present in a space with them. And not have expectations of them, or, you know, make demands, or have it be a reciprocal thing. You know, because part of some men have deep male relationships where they actually can talk at a deeper emotional level about what's going on. But even with talking with friends, there's a reciprocity that's expected. And so there's a sense of, there can be a sense of, oh, well, I'll get through my thing quick and then it's your turn. You know, we always want to give it back to the other person and give them a space to speak and be heard. And with this, you know, there's none of that. It's purely me holding space for a client and being there to, you know, make eye contact so that they're actually feeling seen. They feel the presence, you know, with my listening, and not trying to fix or give unsolicited advice, because it's the non-coaching. So it's really about being allowed to just be, and with no expectation, no judgment, no criticism, no shame. And men are very surprised how quickly they feel differently in their bodies, which is, you know, a difference between men and women as well, because men don't often have the language for emotions and feelings, but they know physiologically what they're feeling. So at the beginning of a session, they might feel really tense and their breath might be really shallow and rapid, you know, and feeling the heart rate very rapid. By the end of the session, they feel so much more relaxed and they feel like at ease. It's a total body sort of reset to have someone just see them.
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess, like, it sounds like the challenge now is to kind of have that follow through to kind of the second side of the kind of the coaching side of it, and kind of having established that initial, you know, comfortable place, that kind of sense of being valued, and it not being you know, any need for reciprocity, or there's no judgment, and they just kind of have that feeling of safety and kind of comfort and fulfillment and feeling whole. Then the next step, I presume, is to kind of hopefully kind of focus on the coaching side and allow people to take that into the home environment and to work out where the overlap is. Is that so?
Well, the coaching is really about techniques to cultivate connection. And so it's about using the techniques that I use in those sort of like holding sessions that allow a man to feel safe and whole and seen and all of these things, so that he can learn how to use those at home, and thereby it will be reciprocated by his partner. Because so many times women are tired of being the ones to do all the emotional labor, and rightfully so, you know, because women are considered to be the more emotional beings. We're the ones who tend to, you know, read the relationship books and learn what to do to make your relationship better. And we read the magazines and we try all these things. But if our partner is in a place where they are shut down, they're not receptive to us trying to do these things. And a lot of times we come at it from an angle where it's like, see, I'm trying, you know, why aren't you responding to this? I'm doing all the things, right? Because we're already in this attack mode. So by kind of reversing it and teaching men sort of the techniques to connect, because women often want their man to make an effort. So these super simple ways to reconnect and start doing that, oh my gosh, I mean, it's just very interesting how quickly women will be receptive to their partner exhibiting and modeling these sorts of behaviors, versus, you know, a woman trying to model and a man, you know, being so shut down that it's like we're hitting a wall. So it will be a quick sort of turnaround as soon as a woman sees the man sort of modeling and, you know, showing up again. But to be able to get to that point, they need to build that confidence and see that connection is possible, because they've been away from feeling connected to someone for so long.
Right. Right. I think that's hopefully a good note on which to finish. It sounds like there is obviously like a groundswell of a need here. That's clear, and it's great to hear that those kind of initial steps are kind of leading to something, and that there are men that stand to kind of benefit from this. So obviously, I hope everyone listeners enjoyed, and thank you, Rachel, for being here today.
Thank you. It's always lovely to talk with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully, we'll talk again. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye for now.
Bye.